welcome to FPTV New Releases with my special guest, the author Christopher Priest. Chris is a multi-award-winning author. He's won the BSFA 4 times. His novel The Separation won the Arthur C. Clarke Award and the British Science Fiction Award. His celebrated novel The Prestige won a major literary prize, the James Tate Black Award, and a major genre prize, the World Fantasy Award. And I guess that's the thing about Chris's career. He sits comfortably in two worlds. He's an acclaimed contemporary literary novelist while also being a leading figure in science fiction and fantasy. How are you, Chris?
Oh, I'm fine. That's fine, thank you. Yeah.
We're here to talk about your great new novel, The Evidence, which I've got right here. Fantastic book, which the viewers of this interview can order from the links attached to this interview. Chris, what can you tell us about The Evidence?
Well, I wrote it last year, and I wanted to do a break from the kind of books I normally write. And I suddenly got interested in the golden age thriller, the Agatha Christie type of locked room mystery. And I decided the time has come just to sort of kind of deconstruct it. And the book is about a world where there is no crime. And yet they have a police force armed to the teeth. And things going on which they don't call crime, but which kind of involve killing people and things. And so I sort of went through all the various cliches of the thriller genre. I mean, I have a locked room mystery in The Evidence. Very proud of my locked room mystery, because in the classic locked room, you have a locked door, and behind which is a dead body with no sign of how he's been murdered. But in my locked room, you open the door and the killer's in there, there's no body. So I'm kind of pleased with that.
And of course, that sort of inversion is like a regular feature of your work. It would seem to me, as somebody who's is a great fan of your novels, what I've always really appreciated about them is the fact that, for example, I don't want to give it away in case for somebody who hasn't read it, but the Glamour, for example, is a take on it's a great novel, which is a take on a key science fiction genre from another sort of avenue in completely. Yeah. Whereas, The Prestige, which is a brilliantly filmed by Christopher Nolan, which we were just talking about before we started this interview, it's kind of sci-fi conjoined with the epistolary graphic gothic novel, right? So this it seems to me, is very much a motif in your work. Could you just expand upon that a little bit?
Well, I think, Andrew, you actually sort of summed it up yourself, really, because I really dislike labels. I hate being labelled by anything. And so the problem with fiction is it can't be sold in this country, and certainly in the USA, without some kind of pre-warning of what it is with a label. This is a thriller, this is a romance, this is science fiction. And I like to subvert that. I like to kind of follow the rules, but also break them at the same time. Because I think readers respond to that. A lot of people, you see, I think there's what I call the literature of confirmation, which is riddles the English literary novel, the McEwans of this world, where you don't have anything real happen. What you have is a sort of little problem, or a stress or tension or something like that, at the end of which is all resolved. It either ends unhappily or happily, but the reader is left with nothing much except a fait accompli. And what I like to write a book which grabs the reader and says, look, have you thought about it this way? And then leave them with that idea.
Yeah.
Because that interests me when I read a book like that, a novel or see a film. That interests me much more than something with a pat ending or a happy ending or a resolved ending. And but it's not that I want to write obscure books, because I think my books have endings, they have resolutions, they are explained. but the ideas are left dangling, so people take them home with them. I mean, The Prestige is I suppose, is the least science fictional book I've ever written. It's not. It's a set of the 19th century. It's about two stage magicians. All the magic is completely authentic. It's all completely imperial. There's no, the only gizmo in it is the gizmo that one of the characters gets built for him.
Yes.
But I remember with that, somebody said to me, it wouldn't work, and you'd need the power of 200 nuclear power stations working full time just to power it. So I said, okay, so it does work.
Yeah, right on as well. I mean, just to continue talking about The Prestige for a second, can you talk about your experience of seeing the movie, which I know you're like and you're very fond of, which I think is probably the best expression I can think of having a book and a film adaptation, which are both equally satisfying, but also quite different in some respects. I think that's a fascinating dynamic.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that the book was adapted by Jonathan Nolan, and I think it's a brilliant adaptation. I mean, I've studied film, I've written film, I've been going to the cinema all my life, I theorize about film, and Nolan got it. Jonathan Nolan really got it. And that year, when they got to the Oscars, it didn't even get a nomination for the adaptation. And the winner was, I think it was a Scorsese film, The Party, I think it's called, which was a remake of
a remake of a Hong Kong movie. Yeah, it's a remake of Infernal Affairs.
Adapted film, but it had sort of DiCaprio and Matt Damon and directed by Scorsese. It was a major film, and it got the Oscar. And I thought that was a real crime, because I think the adapted screenplay Oscar is basically a craft Oscar. And Jonathan Nolan, in my view, absolutely deserved it, because my book is difficult. There's a lot in it you can't use on film, and yet he found a way of doing it and kept the theme of the book. So that was the first thing I'd say. And the second thing is, I thought it was, well, I thought anecdotally, I like you, I used to do film reviews, and twice a week I've got to London, go to Wardour Street and sit in some viewing theatre and see a few films.
Yeah, me too.
The always old journals, perhaps even you,
yeah.
sitting there bleary. The film would show with
the free sandwich and the bottle of beer.
Then Warner Brothers brought out The Prestige, and I got a ticket for me and Nina to go and see the press show. And so we toggled along. It was at the View in Leicester Square. And when we went in, the place was packed. And I said to Nina, I wonder what they're showing tonight, because it's really busy. And the press show of The Prestige in the biggest auditorium in the View. I mean, I had 1,000 people. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely amazing. So we sat there, the film came on, and I had no advance warning what the film was like. And I just, holy shit. That's the sort of feeling.
It must be such a satisfying feeling. I mean, I wish we had known each other back then, because I was there as well. I was there at that screening.
Yeah.
You
were?
Oh yeah, 100%. I was. Yeah. I was publishing Uncut at the time, actually, and we loved the film on Uncut magazine, I reviewed it, and we were blown away. I mean, it was one of those screenings, and this must have been very satisfying for you, where everybody came out really buzzed positively about the movie, and that's battle hardened, frontline journalists. Which is usually a notion of cynicism.
Yeah, it was the first time I heard an audience coming out of The Prestige, and they were talking about it.
Yeah. And
so often you come out of the film, you've seen enough, you've had enough, you've got to get the tube home, and you're hungry, you haven't had dinner, this sort of thing. But these people say, God, what the hell was that about? That was great, and this kind of thing. And they were actually talking about the ideas from the film. And I think this is sort of an underrated quality of film, that people like to think about films.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And
The best film I've seen this year, I saw it the same week I saw Tenet, was I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the Charlie Kaufman film that's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that's as good as The Prestige.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of film. It's interesting and enjoyable to watch. But at the end, you think, what the fuck was that about?
Right on. I couldn't agree more. You want films to live with you afterwards, and live on in your mind and fuel your conversations. And I think to roll back to because I think Kaufman's a genius. To roll back to The Prestige. I mean, I think I already had the imagery from the book in my mind. And again, I don't want to get into it, because if you're watching this, you haven't read The Prestige, go and buy a copy from us. Because it's well worth reading. But there are some of that more gothic imagery that, let's say, is in the final course of the book, and in fact the denouement of the book has lived with me since I've read it. And the film does the same thing in a different way. There are some images in there, and that's what you want from the things that entertain you. I think you want them to live on and to haunt your mind.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's Nolan's masterpiece.
Hey, to flip back to the evidence, there's something I wanted to ask you about before we close out, Chris, which is about, could you tell me a bit about the Dream Archipelago?
Oh Christ!
And what I guess what inspired you to create it and where it comes from?
Well, it came from an original short story, the first short story I wrote, which is called Horrors. I wrote that some 30 years ago. And it struck me as being a very malleable background. It was something I could do things with. It was a kind of tapestry. And so the next story I wrote, I set in another part of Dream Archipelago. Then for a while, I think I wrote 5 long short stories, which were all set in Dream Archipelago. And each one was on a different island. Each one had a different set of circumstances. So that was that. But then I wrote a novel called The Affirmation. And in this, the central character, who lives in the here and now, in effect, dreams up the Dream Archipelago as a kind of alternate understanding of his life. And so this made the Dream Archipelago much more of a kind of mental projection, something which was inner rather than an external world. And so since then, I've written 3 or 4 more novels set in the Dream Archipelago, and they both have that quality. They are both realistic. In the Dream Archipelago, they have the internet and they have email, and they have boats and cars and power cuts and skyscrapers and stuff like that. And it's a real world in a livable sense, but at the same time, it has this sort of unearthly quality of being a mental construct as well. And so I go back to it from time to time. I think the evidence is probably the last one I'm going to do. I think I've just about worked it out now. Like a scene. I've worked a scene of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's always great to visit the Dream Archipelago again. And once again, that's where the evidence available from the links attached to here is set. Though I'm out here shilling for you, mate. This is what I do, and which is a fantastic book. And just before we go, Chris, could you fill us in on what you're working on at the moment? Because I think you've just finished a new novel, right?
I'm working on nothing. I'm talking most of what I'm doing at the moment is 2 weeks. I finished it literally 2 days ago. And yesterday I sent it to my agent, so it's as fresh as that. It's called Expect Me Tomorrow. And it's the first book, I believe, which is a scientifically accurate, optimistic understanding of climate change.
Right, okay.
It's actually a scientific approach to climate change, but not a pessimistic one.
Well, I'm all in on that. That you've completely got me with that one-line description.
I've always maintained that from the point of view of anyone writing about the future, you've got to deal with climate change now. You can't, it's too big. And I think you're left with 3 alternatives. One is you totally ignore it, pretend it's not happening. which of course is a big problem, or you suffer from it. You know, you describe it. The seas are flooding in, and the prairies are burning, and the Amazon jungle's gone, and everyone's very gloomy. So you end up with the road or something like that, or you try and solve it. And I've been thinking that there is a way of solving climate change, and I've thought about it. I'm not a scientist, but I've read science. I'm interested in science, and I believe there is hope that we can actually fix this problem, and this is the book that does it.
Fantastic.
Nobody's read it yet, so they don't know.
I can't wait to read it. On that supremely positivist note, and that's Expect Me Tomorrow. Yes, is that what the title is going to be?
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Expect.
Sorry, expect me tomorrow. It's
easy to write down and say, expect me tomorrow. No, it's based on one of the people, one of the central characters, talk about what it's like to suffer the effects of climate change. He lives about 30 years from now, when it's really hitting in big time. He said, all you can do is survive the day, and then you expect tomorrow. What's that going to bring? And that's another day of survival, another set of problems, you know, another sort of plague of insects, or another drought, or something like that. And it's anyway, that's
well, that is fascinating. And again, you know, kind of just the concept, a positive novel about the issues that are facing us with the global climate. That to me is fascinating. So you have been watching FPTV new releases, and it has been my pleasure to be talking with one of my all-time favorite authors, Christopher Priest, about his new novel, The Evidence, which you can order here. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me, mate. It's been great to chat with you.
Well, thank you, Andy. It's been great. Thank you.